I'm standing outside of Betty's Used Books in Chase, British Columbia. Forest fires are raging all through the province, but for now we are safe. I only mention this because the sky seems to be orange with smoke that is blowing in our direction. The town smells like a campfire. As I walk into Betty's Used Bookstore, which seems to be a very nice conversion of a shed into a shop, a man walks past me and says, "Betty will be with you shortly." Upon entering, I'm greeted with the smell and charm that only a used bookstore can provide. I later find out the man's name from the driveway is Ralph, Betty's husband. After looking around the bookstore for a while, I find a real gem, the Vinyl Cafe Notebooks by Stuart McLean, and it's a signed copy. Delighted, I return home being in quotes because I'm never in one place long enough for that title to stick. The next day I called Betty and asked if she would like to record a podcast with me. She politely declined as she tends to shy away from the microphone. This is fair, it's common. She did suggest I sit down with her partner and husband Ralph, so I did. The following day I returned to the bookstore to have a chat with Ralph. Cool. So what I'll do beforehand is just give a little brief introduction. Like I'll record that another time, so we can just start now. So yeah, thanks for having me here. I'm with Ralph. The reason why I met Ralph was through Betty's Used Book sign. I popped in and purchased a book from Betty in her lovely shop there. It's behind their house in Chase, BC. And I was wondering if I could get an interview with Betty, but when I called, I was informed that maybe Ralph would be a better person to speak to. Betty's a little shy with the microphone and stuff, which is understandable. I mean, it's kind of a awkward thing if you've never done it before. So I'm sitting down with Ralph here now, and we're just going to talk a little bit about his history, about his books, about Chase. He mentioned he was a logger for a little while, so I'd like to get into that. So yeah, thanks for having me, Ralph.
Oh, it's good to have you. But I think Betty was passing the buck.
Oh, that's what she was doing.
But no, she doesn't. She's a good writer, but she doesn't like interviewing, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Actually, she's done quite a bit of writing. She's done a big research project on the Sons of the Pioneers. Are you old enough to remember them?
Probably not.
Bob Nolan, who was a man from Nova Scotia, or grew up as a boy there, and went down into the States. His father was a Canadian, and his parents separated. His father took him into the States, and just to shorten it a bit here, he was a young man in California, Hollywood, broke, no money, no job, and he met this man who eventually became Roy Rogers, and they could both sing and play guitar, and they got on a radio station, and then eventually they formed the group, the Sons of the Pioneers, and it's history. Anyway, Betty did a big research project on Nolan, and everything is archived in the University of South Carolina or North Carolina, in the Southern Folklife collection, all her information. And I've been watching this over the years. She's been working on it. She's actually she's put together a website along with Bob Nolan's son-in-law, who lives in Las Vegas, grandson, I'm sorry. And the website is, if you use the internet, it's well worth looking at. It's old Western music. It's not modern music.
Sons of Pioneer, it was called?
Yeah, I'll give you the, it's SOP, which is Sons of the Pioneers.
So probably just Google that and it would come up,
yeah,
the website?
At bobnolan.com or something like that. If you Google it, it'll come up right away.
Where did the interest for that come from?
When she was young, she was a fan of the Sons of the Pioneers.
Okay.
It's old Western music, and their group has carried on, all different people now, of course, And just about a month ago, we went to a show in Kamloops in the Sagebrush Theatre. The modern Sons of the Pioneers are touring in Canada.
Okay.
Very good. Anyway, that's my wife, and so, like I said, she can write, but she wants nothing to do with the microphone, which I'm not fussy about it either. But Jordan's, he's a, I don't know the word for him, but he's a very interesting fellow, and I'll go along with this.
All right, thanks. That's great. So the bookstore here, I love going to like roadside bookstores or any old. They all have their charm. You know, you walk in and the way they look, the way they smell, it's so nice. So what was the origin story of the bookstore here?
I'll try to keep it.
You can
condense it a bit for you, but
yeah.
The history of the bookstore. Betty has always been an avid reader, had a lot of books of her own. She was a school teacher in her younger days, and she left school teaching and raised 4 children for us. And she never did go back to teaching because she would have had to upgrade her certificate and so on. But she worked as a librarian for a while. But she had quite a collection, and when the internet sales got going, she started selling some of her own collection online at abebooks.com.
Okay.
And it was interesting because the world is your market, and you wind up communicating by email with people all over the world and shipping books literally all over the world. She started it, and I was still working. I was working in the woods, but getting to the age where it's time to quit. I stayed there too long. It's a young man's job. But before I left, quit my job, I remodeled our old 2-car garage. I put a storefront on it and set her up selling used books. And like I said, she sold online. And so when I retired from the woods, basically she told me that you can run a chainsaw, but now you have to run a computer.
Ah.
So I wound up helping her with the online sales, and it was very interesting. Your biggest market was the U.S. because of the population, but literally we ship books all over the world. But what brought an end to that was Canada Post rates. And our biggest market, like I said, was the U.S., but they have a book rate, a media rate for shipping books in the U.S., and they'll ship a book for about half of what we do, their cost. So how do you compete with a dealer down there? So finally, we decided that we would just open up a little storefront here and quit selling online, because the margin of profit just wasn't there when you're paying that kind of shipping for the books. And so here we are.
So how long has it been there approximately for? How long have you had the physical shop?
About 15 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, about that. And it's turned out pretty good. Basically what it is, it's a supplement to our income, because I worked non-union work in the woods, and so there was no company pension. So all we have is the CPP and the old age pension and some savings, and so the store profit from the store offsets that a bit. It picks up the slack,
Great.
And so far it's working.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's interesting.
Yeah.
Book people are interesting, just like Jordan here.
That's good to hear. So I'm interested about your career pre-Betty's bookstore.
Well,
you mentioned you were in the woods.
I'll take you a little further back. Which
Sure, yeah.
You'll wonder how this all come about.
Can you hold the mic, sorry, a little bit close? Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
I trained with the Mounted Police in Saskatchewan and Regina in 1962. And at that time, you signed a contract for 5 years. And I was, my first posting was Prince Rupert, north coast of British Columbia. And just so happened that that was 1963. I was posted there. And Betty, my wife, grew up in southern British Columbia, and her first teaching job was Prince Rupert that same year. And that's where we met. We were married about 2.5 years later, I guess. But when my 5-year contract was up, I had worked in Prince Rupert and Smithers, and I decided that I just I like to work with my hands. And at that time, the pay was not good in the Mountain Place. It's a little different now. Anyway, I went to work in the woods, logging, and wound up towboating and booming logs at a Prince Rupert. And we lived there for 11 years. And we had 4 children. And work was a little slack up there, and it's a little remote when my wife's folks were all down here around Chase. My relatives were all in Saskatchewan, so just to visit the grandparents was a long trip. So we moved down here in 78, and I worked in the woods here from 78 till about 10 years ago, I guess. And that's when I retired from the woods. That's when I went to work helping Betty.
Okay. So you were in Prince Rupert before you came here.
Yes.
What was, like you said, it was a remote area up there, and it was the early 60s. What was probably the mid 60s at that point in time? You said you had started in 62.
Yeah, it was 64. I went to Prince Rupert in 63.
Okay, so what would, to just like paint a picture of your house and like your day-to-day in that time period in that part of the province, what did it look like?
Okay. When I say remote, it's just that it's a long ways from southern British Columbia.
Okay.
With driving with little kids, it would take us about 2 days to drive down here.
What would it take now?
Well, I have done it in 1 day, and it would take about 14, 15 hours steady driving.
Back then, was it gravel road the whole way?
Part of it was, actually. There was some, even one-lane sections where you had to stop or back up to meet traffic there from Smithers to Hazelton to Terrace. And there was some of that even Terrace to Prince Rupert. But that's all changed now. It's all good modern highway right to the coast.
Yeah.
But that is the only road in, and in the other... only other access, you can fly in and out of Prince Rupert, Vancouver. Or the BC ferries used to stop there. I don't know just what is happening there right now. And the Alaska ferries stop in Prince Rupert. A very interesting town. Talk about multicultural. For that time in particular, we had a lot of First Nations people. They would come to town. They worked in the canneries, in the salmon industry. It was big time then, and several reserves nearby, and then the Nass River and whatnot. And at that time, they had 2 pulp mills in Prince Rupert. I don't believe they have either one of them running anymore. That was the main source of employment. Actually, I would say the pulp mills were the big thing, and the fishing, commercial fishing, which is almost non-existent now too.
Yeah. You said you were towboating. What's towboating?
Towboating, yeah. That was part of the logging and booming logs. And
what's booming logs?
Booming logs, okay. The most economical way to move logs or wood like that, raw wood, is on the water. And on the coast, that's the way they did it. early days, they made huge rafts and they lashed them together with cable, and they would tow them even from the Queen Charlotte Islands to the mainland. But in my day, they had switched to barges. They had what they called a self-loading, self-dumping barge. It was towed by a towboat, and two big cranes mounted on it, and they would load that barge. And then when they got to their destination, they flooded one side of that barge, and it would lay right over, and the logs would all slide off, hopefully. And when they slid off, our job was to sort those logs and prepare them. At that time, they were shipping a lot of raw logs to Japan, and the company I worked for, that was their business. The logs all had to be sorted and graded and prepared to load on ship, and pretty well what I did for 11 years mainly. And then I did work the towboats too, moving this wood in and out of the harbor, and from the harbor to the pulp mill, and or up and down the coast. Very interesting work if you liked working outside. Didn't mind the weather. It rained a lot in Prince Rupert.
Would that mainly be in the spring, summer, fall months? Like if it was winter, would you be able to towboat?
It was, we would only get shut down for maybe a month, 6 weeks in the winter. The top end of the harbor where they stored logs had a lot of salt, fresh water on top of the salt, and it would actually freeze over. But some winters it wouldn't even freeze. It's fairly mild, being coastal weather, but colder than Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
So if the top end of the inlet froze over, well, then we'd have to shut down until it broke up.
Okay. Now you mentioned living in Prince Rupert was interesting. You smiled when you said interesting.
Oh, yeah, well, when I went there, stationed there with the RCMP, that was in the 60s, just previous to that, a couple of years, they had a major riot. The mayor had to read the Riot Act and all. At that time, you would get, there was a couple block section there with about 4 local pubs that emptied right onto the street there. And
sorry, just a little closer at the mic again.
And
there you go, perfect.
They would, closing time, about 12:30, these pubs all emptied onto the street. And of course, the folks are hungry, and there's a few, 2 or 3 restaurants that stayed open to accommodate them. But after they'd been drinking all night, and
now, were you a part of this hungry mob, or were you
no,
just on
well,
liquor?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But no, mainly our job was to at that time was to patrol those 2 block areas, and trouble started. Usually, it was a fight or an assault or something, and you had to pick out the troublemaker and give him a room for the night. And really, my experience there was not. It was pretty mild. It was just liquor was your problem.
Yeah.
There was very little drug activity at all at that time. But the folks come to town. They've been fishing or working in the cannery. They're making good money, and it's summertime, and they're celebrating. So, but this. It never got that far, that bad when I was there, but it would get a little tense often. And but there was a real cross-section of nationalities there. We had a lot of Italians. Italian immigrants, very good people, hard-working people. They came to work. A lot of them, they worked on the railway, or they worked for the city. They worked at just about anything. Some got into business, did very well. We had quite a few. I worked with men from Yugoslavia. There again, good, hard-working immigrants that came here and weren't thinking that the world owed them a living. They were willing to work for it. And pulp mill was probably a major employee, other than the fishing and the canneries. and the variety, Scandinavian people. It was a place to work.
Wow.
And these people wanted to work, and we enjoyed it there. We really did.
That's great. So after Prince Rupert, you came down here, and it was for logging as well. What year was that you would have come to Chase?
That was 78.
78, okay. And Chase was predominantly like a milling, like logging town. That was its foundation?
Chase has always been, since in my day, has always been a tourist. Not even so much Chase, but the North Shuswap. The population on the north side of the lake there goes from about 10,000 to 30,000 in the summer with the tourists. But the big mill at Adams Lake, and that, of course, there was, it's a sawmill, it needs wood, so there's a lot of logging contractors here. And another big mill it's still operating. Both these are the one at Canoe over by Salmon Arm, and they took timber from the north end of the big lake there, Seymour Arm, and they had a logging camp there, and that's where I spent Monday to Friday for 15, 20 years. And the wood went in the water. There we go again, wood in the water. Cheapest way to move it. They trucked it and dumped it in the water there, and they don't allow that. They won't allow any new log dumps anymore, because of the environment. But they had a log dump at Seymour Arm and one here at Lee Creek, just this end of the big lake, and then they would tow that wood all the way to Canoe over by Salmon Arm.
So log dumps are just where the logs would enter the water and would be moved?
Off the truck into the water, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then they were just what they called a bag boom on the lake. It's simple to move wood because you just run a set of boomsticks around your wood, and they came off the trucks in bundles. And one little boat had one, I know even on the coast there, they said like a small towboat could handle about 4 million board feet of wood, which is a lot of wood in the water. And where a truckload alone is, it's a drop in the bucket compared to 4 million board feet. And so that, like I say, the amount of wood you can move in the water with very little power really makes all the difference. So, but they would never allow them to start a new log dump. Existing ones, they allowed them to keep them going.
Okay. Briefly before we started there, you were mentioning the environmental implications of logging. I don't know much about it myself, but as someone who's been in the industry or was in the industry for such a long time, what would be your thoughts on the implications of mass logging in the BC area?
Well, yes, there's no question about it. It was a problem, and like I gave you the name of a gentleman who could tell you a lot more about that. But things were done in the woods that should never have been done, and I would say back in the 80s, the government started to clamp down on it, and new regulations in the woods, and rightly so. It was overdue, and it's done a lot differently now. One of the main things is they handle the steep slopes and the water better, because it was the runoff or the erosion and landslides that made a mess after the logging, and all that was an accumulation of water where it shouldn't be. Water in its natural course does fine. Once in a while, nature will go a little wild, but if you get it out of its natural course and it pools somewhere on the hillside, and then you get a landslide, wash out a road, or anyway, that's they're doing it differently now.
Yeah.
It's controlled.
Yeah. After having spent so much time in nature and like working outside, especially in that industry, do you have any observations about? I'm not sure what I'm getting at. Just like the patterns of nature, maybe weather patterns, animal patterns, interesting. Say like observations that were applied to other aspects of your life, or do you know what I'm getting at? Like
not quite.
Okay,
just keep
chipping away. Well, for example, having lived around here for the period of time that you have you noticed seasonal shifts in temperature, or the absence of an animal or an insect, or maybe more of one thing or the other?
Well, weather-wise, definitely. You look out on my front lawn there. There was a time in the winter.
Can you describe your front lawn?
Okay, we have an acre of ground here, and the front lawn is, I would say maybe about 80 feet by 40, maybe a little bigger, and it's not good lawn. It's grass, and it's not even perfectly level. But I had a hydrant out there at the property line that they called it a stop and drain. You could, in the wintertime, you could run water out of it. When you shut it off, it drained underground, so it didn't freeze up. I would make a skating rink out on that lawn for the kids. I had 4 children, and it took a lot of water and took a lot of work. And of course, it took like -20, -25, and some snow, which we got lots of it when we first came down here. -25 was not uncommon in the winter, and colder. Things would freeze up late October, and you'd be well into March before they broke up again. That's changed a bit.
So warmer winters.
Warmer winters, definitely. I'm sure you could get that information from a better source than me, but definitely we've seen that, and that's 40 years we've been looking at it.
Now, how about the summers? This is my first time spending any amount of time in the interior of BC, and it's hot. It's hot for me.
Hot, yeah. Like my wife actually grew up as a child in this area, and she said she remembers it a lot hotter.
Okay.
But, and I've seen it. We've had some hot years, but I wouldn't say that this heat is unusual, but extended periods of this, like this, without rain, this is the last few years, and that's where your forest fire problem comes from. Like I said, somebody has probably got all the records for this, but...
No, it's interesting to hear your own take, because it's obviously something you would have noticed over that period of time, right? So if someone comes to Chase, what should they do? What would you tell someone to see?
You mean as a tourist?
Yeah.
Depending on what they're interested in. Of course, we get the book people coming in here, like yourself. If they... where a lot of our summer customers come from, they have summer homes, or they're in campsites out on the big lake. Chase itself, there's 2 lakes. The Big Shuswap, which is kind of an H shape, and Salmon Arm is over on the other side there. That's the biggest body of water, and the Adams River flows into the Big Shuswap just before the Big Shuswap drains into the Little Shuswap, which is at Chase. And so the Little Shuswap winds up being almost like a wide spot in the Adams River, and it's cold. If you want nice warm swimming temperatures and beaches, you have to go up onto the big lake. We have a beach here, but it's nothing like the beaches on the big lake. Okay. Scotch Creek on the big lake is a
Scotch Creek
preferred place. Seymour Arm has beautiful beaches, and the water is much warmer for swimming and boating, of course. The Sicamous over there used to be called the houseboat capital of the world because of the amount of houseboats that they rent in the summer on the Shuswap. Now that's one of the biggest drawing cards, I would say, for people is the lake, the big lake. And other things to do around here. Of course, you can go out wilderness camping, and the government has some campsites out on some of the logging roads and that. You can access them, and they're just more cleared place with some picnic tables and outhouses, and but they're there. But on the North Shuswap, there's some private campgrounds, but a big government campsite. But it's got now so crowded out there, you have to book ahead to get into that campsite. You'll book your 2 weeks, and we get those people coming here. They do their shift at their allotted time at the campsite, but they'll come out of Calgary, and they'll come in a Chase and come in here and stock up on books before they go out to their summer home or their cabin, and that's very helpful for us. And the same thing, people from the coast will come up and do the same thing.
I noticed on a lot of the, I noticed on all the garbage bins that you guys have, the Bighorn Sheep. Is that a prevalent animal in the area?
That's interesting because I've been told that no, it's not even really native to this area. It was introduced on this mountain across the creek here, long before my time. And they survive, but they have pretty well died off a couple of times, I think. They get a disease, it's called, it's a lungworm, and it could be from overcrowding or inbreeding and whatnot here. And so they will bring in other sheep from another area, different breeding stock, and but no, it's not the major. It's only right here on this mountain. There are some by Kamloops, a few, but I've seen it when you could maybe run into a herd on this mountain, about 5 or 6 big full curler rams or something, and then a herd of does and little ones.
Is that what you call the horns? Curler rounds?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When I say a full curl, it'll come right around.
Oh, okay.
It'll come up and then back around like that.
Like the one on the garbage bin?
The one you see the picture of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And Chase has taken that for their kind of town logo or something. So you'll see it on the sides of the village trucks and whatnot.
Yeah.
But really, this is not what you'd call bighorn country.
Where would that be? More Kamloops or?
No, Kamloops is about as bad as Chase. They've got a herd there, but you get down into, I think, down around down the Fraser Valley there, and some of that rough country. Lytton, Lillooet, but also you go back towards Revelstoke, and then you're getting back into sheep country.
Yeah, I think we saw some on the drive through when we got near Revelstoke. There was some on the highway, and
that's right.
People slowing down. And
the sad part here too in Chase, they'll come down off that hill in the wintertime to lick the salt on the highway.
Yeah.
And get hit with traffic.
Yeah,
it's quite common.
That's too bad. But I mean, they love salt for some reason.
Well, yeah, it's animals are like that. That's why there's even such things as natural salt licks in the woods in places where the wild animals will use them.
What would be an occurrence of a natural salt lick?
I don't know for sure, really.
It's like I just imagine them licking the sides of trees or something. Sap.
Well, no, there would be something to do with the rock or the maybe an old water course or something. I don't understand, but I can't say I've ever seen one. I've seen where people will put out salt licks to attract the animals, and they will come. Well, it's as bad as us humans. Think about the last package of potato chips you bought.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and that that doesn't last very long, does it?
No, sir. No.
And it's the salt, really, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I try not to bring it into the house because as soon as it comes in, it's gone, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no such thing as rationing it.
Right. But as for other things to do in the shoe swap, now in Chase, you've noticed they've got the Zipline.
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
And it's, unfortunately, it's kind of pathetic as a Zipline goes. I think it's 45 seconds or something, or a minute.
Oh, okay.
From the top to bottom.
Are there multiple sections to it, or is it just the one?
They have a short section above the main jump off there. You'll come down a bit, and you can hike up there and take a look at it.
It's the little waterfall there?
Yeah. No, you've got to go. You go up between the cemetery and the Department of Highways yard, that gravel pit.
Okay.
And sometimes there's a big gate there, and if it's locked, the people that run the zip line have a key for it. That road goes up to a water diversion way up in the canyon, and that water diversion provides irrigation for the VLA flat over here.
Okay.
And anyway, they go up there that's where they put in the jump off for the zip line. And they had, like I said, they went in a little further and had a short, kind of an easy one. And you can come down to the main one, and the next main one brings you right down to the highway there.
That's it.
That's what that's it, and it's fast. I wouldn't pay $75 to do it. I enjoy hiking. I hike on both these mountains.
Okay.
But for yourself, if you and your girlfriend, if you'd like a walk someday, you can go from there, and you can either go, if you see that locked gate, two big chain link gates, just go around the right side of it. You can walk around it. It's mainly to keep traffic out. And you can walk up there, get a good view of the town. You can walk around and see the where the zip line starts. Walk in a little further, you can see where the end of that road. It's nice in this weather. It's very cool by the creek there in the canyon. And you can walk right to the water diversion where they divert it into a big pipe that brings it over for irrigation on the flat. Or you can hike up the other way from the cemetery, and you can go up switchbacks. It'll take you right up. Beyond that, you can go right through to the road that goes to the Chase Falkland Road up there. You can take you'd want a four-wheel drive to go up that old road now, but okay. It was the original access road to Chase Creek.
We drove up the road that leads to, I guess it's like a back road that goes to Falkland,
mm-hmm.
and it goes by Turtle Valley.
Yeah.
Is there anything over there to see? Like
Turtle Valley?
Yeah.
Well, you can go over there and come back to the highway again out by Squilax. You know where Squilax is.
I've seen it on a map.
Yeah. You can come back to the Trans-Canada Highway there. Okay. It's interesting. It's just farms, acreages and farms, and it's an interesting drive. And actually, you can go from there. You can go around behind the mountain by Skamikan and come out by Tappan over by Salmon Arm. There again, nice drive, but it's just acreages. And
yeah. One last question for you. Are there any like urban myths or legends or, stories that people might know from around here, from this area?
No, I couldn't help you with anything like that. As far as a history of this, it's actually called a book called A Town Called Chase.
Okay.
It was written by Joyce Dunn. And actually, I think they sell new copies over at the tourist bureau across the road there. I know if we pick up used copies, we sell them all. It's about the only real kind of a concise history of the town of Chase. Some people are critical of it. Some of the old-timers say, oh, well, she said this or she didn't say that, but I think she did a good job. She's not living anymore, but...
Okay. A Town Called Chase, Joyce Dunn.
That's right.
Right on. All right, well, I think we can wrap it up there. That's about 40 minutes. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. By now you know that my interview or audio skills are not that good.
Oh, you did fine. That was perfect.
Anyway, thanks.
All right, thank you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Ralph from Betty's Used Books. If you're ever traveling through the interior of British Columbia and need a good read, be sure to stop in.